His uniform was always the dirtiest one on the field. His cheek was stuffed with so much tobacco, it looked like he was chewing on a golf ball. No one played the game harder than Lenny Dykstra, and in 1990, few played the game better. In addition to hitting a career-best .325, he led the National League in hits and on-base percentage. But you know, Dykstra also hit his first and only inside-the-park home run in 1990, 2 years after the release of R.B.I. Baseball for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, is this footage recorded in 2011 from a game released in 1988 some prophetic foreshadowing of what would happen in 1990? I don't know, I'm not a math guy, and frankly, we may never know the truth. All I know is that when I hit that inside the park home run, I noticed the game cartridge had dirt all over its uniform, and it suddenly spit out tobacco juice. Now, was it me, was it the game, or was it Lenny Dykstra? As a lifelong Pittsburgh Pirates fan, Dykstra haunted my dreams as a youth. RBI Baseball did not. When the snow was falling and baseball seemed an eternity away, this game took you back to the dusty diamond, the smell of a warm glove in the sun, the incomparable sound of a drive into the left center gap. Summer always gave way to winter, but in RBI Baseball, it didn't have to. Of course, this was far from the only game in town. When it released to the NES in 1988, it had plenty of competition on the base pads. The 8-bit era was a great era for baseball games, but although the NES had a terrific lineup, RBI Baseball was always at the top of the order. Developed by Namco and published on the NES by Atari's offshoot brand Tengen, RBI Baseball is an arcade-style baseball game in the classic 8-bit tradition. Virtually everything you do in the game, whether it's throwing, pitching, or hitting, uses the same button, with movement and direction handled by the D-pad. Obviously, it's simple to play, but there's also a fine art to mastering the game's mechanics. Now, to be fair, you could say that of many 8-bit baseball games. The difference is in execution and presentation. Things are a little smoother and more refined in this one. It still plays extremely well, and unlike most of its minor league competition, RBI Baseball was the bigs. In fact, that was one of its most distinguishing characteristics. This was one of the earliest games to include actual Major League Baseball players, many of whom were given attributes similar to their actual skills. Legendary base stealer Vince Coleman is almost unstoppable on the base paths. The dynamic duo of Jose Canseco and Mark McGwire is a home run threat in its sleep. Pitchers have varying degrees of break and stamina and power. RBI Baseball was as major league as it got in 1988. What's interesting, though, is that while RBI Baseball was licensed by the MLB Players Association, which gave it the right to use actual MLB player names, the game was not licensed by Major League Baseball itself. So that meant Namco wasn't allowed to include team names or anything like that. So instead, you have generic teams like New York, which implies the Mets, and Houston, which implies the Astros, and, Boston, which implies the Red Sox. Fortunately, that's about the only thing about RBI Baseball you could call generic. Even though the graphics are rudimentary, even for the NES, and there are just 10 teams to choose from, RBI Baseball is an arcade-style baseball classic. A throwback to a bygone time when sports games were a little less focused on realism and a little more focused on fun.